Hello, and welcome to another edition of Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham, where Team Needham discusses everything healthcare. I'm your host, Shawn Needham, along with my wonderful wife, Janet. And we are super excited to be talking about stress, cortisol, and chronic fatigue today with Elizabeth Gaines. Elizabeth, welcome to our show.
It's so nice to be here. Thanks for having me, Shawn and Janet.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about your history. Janet and I, we talk hormones and stress and cortisol all the time. So tell us a little bit about your history and how you ended up being on our podcast.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I did not start off in the healthcare field. I started off as a lighting designer for theater, which is actually a very stressful job. So it's one of those where you sort of work for 14 hours a day and you're under constant scrutiny. You're doing your work in front of everyone. Everyone wants you to hurry up and not waste any time. And then I moved from that into
Can I interject right here?
absolutely.
And you're up until midnight, 1 o'clock most
That's very
show
true.
performances. So
Yes.
you're stressed. Anyway, go
Yes,
ahead.
very, very stressed. Yeah. So then I moved into working on issues of trafficking. And so I started working with an organization in Harlem that served domestic minor sex trafficking victims. So girls under the age of 18 that were under pimp control. And I wound up working there for about 10 years, and it was incredibly stressful for me because every phone call was life or death. Everything that somebody needed was immediate and urgent, and there was no sort of uh, B type situation. It was all sort of rose to the level of emergency all the time.
Yeah, that sounds like stress.
Yeah. And by this time, I'm kind of cresting into my late 30s, mid to late 30s, and I'm starting to have your typical symptoms of, I'm tired. I can't really focus that well. I'm super unmotivated. Um, and you sort of reach this intersection point at that, uh, where you have a little crossroads, and you think to yourself, okay, am I sick or do I just hate my life? And at that point, you generally go to the doctor, and the doctor will, if you are in the phase that I was in, where I was definitely having symptoms, but I wasn't crossing any diagnostic lines. So there was no disease state to be diagnosed. Then the doctor's going to say, you're fine. I think you just hate your life. Take an antidepressant.
Yep.
But if you continue to sort of live in the way that I was living and challenging your vital reserve, then you're going to get worse and worse and worse. And so I eventually ended up with chronic fatigue in my early 40s. And it got so bad that I couldn't get out of bed for longer than a couple of hours every day. And it's a frustrating place to be. And I'm certain that your audience can relate to this because it doesn't have a diagnosis. You look mostly fine, you sound fine, but you just can't participate in your life anymore. And so your friends sort of stop checking in on you, and they stop coming by, and they just sort of have this idea that you're just not fun anymore and you don't want to hang out anymore. And you sort of watch everybody take vacations and find their future spouse. And I just sort of watched as I faded into the background of my own life. I was no longer the main character. And I knew that I had to kind of seek out better answers than this is depression or this is all in your head. And so it took me a long time. I went through what I now know to be the cycle of trial and error, where I was trying everything I could find. I was listening to all the podcasts and buying all the supplements and buying all the gadgets and going to all the conferences. But what really made the difference for me was coming into FDN, Functional Diagnostic Nutrition, where we train our practitioners to read functional lab work and write all natural protocols based on the deficits that the lab work reveals. And it wasn't until I was able to run the labs on myself, which we all in the FDN training become the product of our product. We do everything on ourselves first. where I said, oh, look, there is actually physical deficit here. It just doesn't cross the line into disease yet. And that's why the doctor has his hands tied. He's just not able to help in those situations. So I know my story is not unique and that a lot of your listeners have probably gone through something similar.
For sure. You definitely are unique, and every story is unique in some way. But definitely in the broad sense of things, we hear this quite often. And the best thing is to try to prevent it from happening. But because when it happens, as you know, it you can't turn it around overnight. The chronic fatigue did not happen overnight. You can't turn it around
No,
overnight.
you
It
cannot.
takes time.
And
Right.
you'll never fully reverse it.
Right. So just for our viewers and listeners, cortisol trumps all hormones. It's super important. Our adrenal glands make it. We have to have it to survive. So it is kind of sad that that is not something that we find in our medical system to be addressed, because if it continues to be chronically low, your body is not going to heal. You're just going to stay in that, horrible state. So tell us how you got this turned around. How did you, when you started looking at your labs and your life, how did you find an avenue to change this?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's really important to define what a functional lab is versus a diagnostic lab, because I think the word functional gets thrown around a lot, and
Yes.
this space can be a sort of wildly unregulated place where the same term can mean many different things to many different people. So the way that I think about this is that the doctor is running a diagnostic lab to find a disease, because they need that disease code to then know what the treatment is, to then know what insurance is going to pay for and what is the standard of care there and how do we get around it. But a lot of us fall in this gray space where we know we're not well, but we're not technically sick. And the doctor can't find anything that's wrong necessarily. And so the world of functional testing then comes in and asks a wholly different question, which in these situations I think is a much more productive question. So instead of asking, what disease do you have? The lab asks, where has function been lost for you and by how much? And then once we have a picture of that, like, oh, actually function has been lost. I want to restore function regardless of the symptoms, regardless of what else is going on, regardless of if I'm in a disease state or not a disease state, function isn't present. The body is suppressing function or not able to get where it used to be. And so just having that sort of different lens on information was incredibly helpful. And so when I ran these labs on myself, I discovered that my cortisol was low. Not only was it low, but it was a little bit of a roller coaster. So like low in the morning, high in the afternoon, low in the afternoon, like super high at night. And it explained a lot about why I felt the way I did, why it was really, really hard to get up in the morning, why I couldn't sleep at night, because the body's just sort of making cortisol at the wrong time. And then even though my cortisol was low, when compared to my anabolic potential, cortisol was still dominant. So, as you say, Janet, cortisol is going to win every single time. It trumps everything else. It's going to break our bodies down for quick energy, and it's going to say, hey, I need the floor whenever there's a stressor present, which in our lives is pretty much always, except for when we're really in deep sleep. And so everybody else in the body steps back and says, okay, cortisol, you have the run of the show. But because of that, if cortisol is chronically high or chronically dominant, even if it isn't high, then anabolic potentials chronically steps back and just says, there's no room for me. We're not safe enough to actually think about the internal environment. We have to worry about the external environment all the time. And so what happens in those cases is that you go into what we call catabolic debt, because your processes to build yourself back up have taken a step back. And so now I think about cortisol as being energy on credit. So it's sort of liquefying your easily accessible assets, like your connective tissue, your cartilage, your joints, your tendons, your muscle, that sort of thing, to get blood sugar immediately to face these challenges. But that's energy that you're putting on a credit card, basically. At the end of the day, you're going to have debt, this catabolic debt of how your body has been broken down. And we want our processes to build back up to be able to pay that debt off so that we start every day clean. But when we're constantly undercutting those processes to build us back up, then we start to have debt that carries over and carries over and carries over. And for years and years, then we're in this catabolic debt situation, which is why we start feeling the way that we do. And so that absolutely came out in my labs, that even though my cortisol was low, it was still dominant as compared to my DHEA. And that meant I was in catabolic debt, had been for a really long time. And my sex hormones were really low. And while there's no diagnosis that comes from low sex hormones, that's really the canary in the coal mine, in my view, about a body saying we're not safe enough to reproduce, we're not safe enough to invest in this internal environment being rich and able to fully function because we're spending too much of our money on external stressors. And so the body kind of steps back on the sex hormones. And not only does that compromise fertility, but it also compromises your motivation, your ambition, your joy for life. All of that just sort of fades. And so even though there's no disease present, that's when we get to this intersection of, am I sick or do I hate my life?
That was a great analogy. A lot to unpack there too. I love how you talked about cortisol makes it so we can't be anabolic. And I'm just going to clear this up for our listeners and viewers. So anabolic means that, you're ready to build muscle, build bone, grow, essentially. Cortisol is a catabolic hormone. It, like Elizabeth says, it breaks us down. So cortisol is made in our adrenal glands, which is a little pea-sized gland that sits above our kidneys. And it's made in a diurnal variation, meaning that our cortisol is highest in the morning to prepare us for the stressors of the day. It should slowly go down throughout the day, being lowest at night when we're sleeping. Like Elizabeth says, if it's high at night, you're not sleeping, your body is going to be destroyed, literally. It's going to be catabolized, literally. So I just wanted to clear that a little bit up. Keep going, Elizabeth. This is great.
Yeah, absolutely. And the reason that our cortisol is highest in the morning is because we haven't eaten since our last meal, presumably yesterday. And so the body is like replacing the blood sugar that should be there with cortisol. And then it naturally lowers during the day because the body is expecting that we will replace that with food. Yeah. And so with cortisol, it's one of these things where if you get like a deadline from your boss that you weren't expecting, or if some project comes your way, you can't necessarily go to the store, buy groceries, come home, cook, eat, digest, make energy, and now I'm ready to tackle this project. We have to tackle this project right now. And so we have to have this mechanism for energy on credit. But what our bodies are not expecting biologically, because this just wasn't the case for most of our existence, is that we're going to have one stressor after another, after another, after another, after another, after another, and get no respite from that, because cortisol is going to be there responding to each of these stressors. But if they never stop, then there's no time to heal the damage that was done by cortisol. And as Janet said in the very beginning, we cannot both be building up and breaking down at the same time. There has to be a choice. And the body will not repair itself until it feels safe enough to do so, until it feels like the external world is no longer throwing unknowns at it. And in our daily lives, those unknowns last even to when we go to bed. I would imagine that your audience can relate to laying down in bed, trying to relax, but instead you're thinking about your to-do list. You're thinking about all the things you didn't get done. You're thinking about how much you're going to owe in taxes this year. You're thinking about whether or not you can pay for this upcoming bill. all of that is a stress response. And all of that is then inhibiting the body's ability to come back and heal the damage that was done during the day. And that's how we get into debt over time.
And so how do we get out of debt?
How do we get out of debt? Yeah. I wish it were a simple answer. So at FDN, we recognize that you have to have comprehensive lifestyle change in order to really address these stressors that you didn't live into overnight. You lived yourself into it over a long period of time. So we need every single penny that we can get diverted back to the vital reserve bank account. So it's important that we take a long look at all of the stressors. And so when I say stress, most people think about mental emotional stress, right? Is that what you guys think of when I say stress?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And those are the big rocks. That's a lot of money is going out of the bank on mental and emotional stress. But we also have what is called physical stress. So that can be those people that sit down at a desk for too long, which is absolutely me. Those people that assault themselves with blue lights from screens all day long, which is absolutely me. Those people who have a job that requires repetitive motion. So maybe you're a massage therapist or a chiropractor, and you're just constantly like working on that wrist, and that's causing that physical stress. Maybe you're drinking a lot of coffee, sort of pounding that coffee to stay awake. That is a physical stressor. Maybe some of you are having wine at night to be able to help you go to sleep. That is a physical stressor. And then we have the environmental stressors. So what am I washing my clothes in? What am I cooking in? What am I storing my food in? Where is my food coming from? Is it covered in pesticides? If I'm eating meat, is that has it been pasture raised? Has it been grass finished? Or is it living in a pretty toxic environment? So all of these things cost money out of the vital reserve bank account. Now, the great thing about stress is that it's cumulative. So even if we can't change our jobs overnight or fix our financial situations overnight or fix our relationships overnight, these places where we're spending a lot of money, we can find all of these places where we're spending pennies on these stressors and eliminate them immediately. So this is part of what we do at FDN is we do a really big inventory on all of the stressors in our lives and in our clients' lives. And we do our best to take out as many as possible. And we also look at our diet. We don't believe there is one diet for all humans. If there was, we would have figured this out 1,000 years ago. We would have figured it. We would all be eating the perfect diet. Science would have revealed it. We would have had it by now. But we all have different genes, and we all have genes that were influenced by humans that were living in enclaves in very different places with different resources. And so all of us now have a lot of mix of what's going on there. So it's important to identify through testing what the right diet is for you specifically, because it's not going to be the same for anyone else. And the really good example of this is I do very well on a high protein, moderately high fat, low carb diet. I do very well with that. My brother, who is genetically extremely close to me, is a vegetarian and does very well on that. So even within families, the eating patterns can be the eating needs can be really, really different. So it's really important to nail that down so that we are getting the right fuel mixture for each individual person. We also take rest very seriously. So most health coaches sort of maybe touch on this, but it kind of goes in one ear and out the other. But we really believe that sleeping well and sleeping regularly is a key ingredient to health and life. And we get a lot of messaging in this world that says differently, like all of the FOMOs and the YOLOs and the you can sleep when you're dead and all of that runs counter to this idea. But really, that is where your body is healing. That's where it is doing this work of building back up. That's where you're paying back your catabolic debt. That's where you're getting out of debt and building back up. So it is incredibly important that we not undercut that or chronically undercut that. Or we're going to wake up when we're in our 30s and 40s and we're going to say, why do my joints hurt? Why am I getting headaches? And why suddenly I can't sleep and I'm gaining weight? Well, it's because the balance on your catabolic credit card is really high after all of those years. And then we use exercise. Yeah. So we want to make sure that we are exercising appropriately to the amount of money that we have in our vital reserve bank, so that we are actually putting money in the bank rather than spending money on exercise. So if I'm really tired, but I'm still trying to do CrossFit 8 times a week, that's a problem. I'm no longer helping myself. And I find this to be true, especially with the women out there, that it's a little bit counterintuitive, that sometimes when we're not seeing results, when we're exercising as hard as we possibly can, but we're seeing muscle wasting and we're seeing ourselves gain weight, and then you say, maybe do less exercise. That is a very hard sell because it seems counterintuitive. And but really that is the truth. Like, we need more money in the bank account for healing, less money spent on exercise, until we've got more money in that bank, and then we can spend commensurately. But we've got to identify that amount of money so that we can design an exercise program that stays within the budget, as it were. And then the last thing is supplementation. So we want to use supplementation as a supplement, as supplemental to all of the other lifestyle shifts that are going on. And I know you guys, with your past, you probably see this a lot, that all of us have been ingrained with this idea that we can take a pill and we can cure our symptoms, and we don't actually have to make any lifestyle adjustment. Yeah. But of course, when we have pharmacology available to us, that is like nature times 1,000. And it comes with side effects and chemicals and all kinds of other things, but it does have the power to bust through a symptom. But supplement is like nature times 10 or 20 or 30. It just doesn't have the power to do that in the same way. And so it has to be combined with lifestyle change. That's the only way to get it done. And I know that I have a lot of clients that come in and just say, oh, I have this going on. What should I take? I have this going on. What should I take? And I'm like, well, let's talk about your diet. Let's talk about how much you're sleeping. Let's talk about your exercise and your stressors. But this is a very ingrained thing in all of us, from the time before we could really challenge our assumptions that a pill is the answer, and that nothing else really matters.
That's a great point. I think we do see that a lot, even from our background. You know, we have a friend that says there's a pill for every ill. I don't know where Robbie grabbed this, but she's right. I think we have to realize that nature doesn't come to us and heal that quickly. It's a process. And so if we were going to solve this, we would have done that when we got big pharma, right? Like when Rockefeller started developing pharmaceuticals, we would have been there. We're not.
We would
more
all
broken
well,
than we've
yes.
ever.
Yeah, we're sicker than we ever been.
Yeah,
Instead, we're getting sicker every year. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we have to step away from the insanity of it.
Yeah.
You know, repeating the same thing over and over and over again is just insanity.
Yeah.
I just have to focus on a few things you said. So many things. I mean, it's just perfect. You're a great fit for this podcast because you're preaching to the choir. You're really just making our voices bigger. So thank you so much for that, Elizabeth. But one of the things we talk about is you can't supplement your way out of a bad diet.
Yeah,
and
you can't.
Or lifestyle in general.
Yeah.
And we say that a lot. I mean, and we get patients that they want to know what supplements they should take. It's like, well, and you know, we have a pharmacy that sells supplements. So,
sure.
You know, we've got skin in the game, but we're also honest. And it's like, look, you know, sleep, diet, and exercise is what's important. There's a few supplements you can take for good insurance. And when you're sick, you know, there's some supplements you might have to take to get better.
Sure.
But long term, if you have a good lifestyle, you shouldn't need a lot of supplements. Another thing I want to talk about is recovery or sleep. And sleep trumps it all. And on the exercise thing, when people think they can, you know, exercise is a stress. And there are times when we probably shouldn't exercise.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. people don't realize this, but the truth of the matter is we get weaker when we exercise. Those are facts. I mean, think about it when you're riding a bike or running, or at the end of the run and end of the ride, or if you're lifting weights. At the end, you're more tired than you were before you went in.
That's
You actually
true.
get weaker.
Yep.
We only get stronger if we have the appropriate amount of recovery and rest. That's when we get stronger. And food. We won't get stronger without the right food either.
Absolutely.
So, all great points, Elizabeth.
Yeah, absolutely. And to your point, there are times when we shouldn't exercise. Exercise increases blood flow. So if you have a budding virus in your system, and the immune system is doing its best to keep that in one location so it can dominate it, and then you go and exercise, you're going to spread that thing around and make sure that it takes root and that you get sicker. So definitely exercise has its limitations.
And appropriate times. So if you've got a scheduled exercise on a Monday, and all of a sudden it's 8:00 at night, and you haven't done your exercise, and now you do your 1 hour workout at 8:00 at night, and you usually go to bed at 9:30, bad idea. That's a really bad idea, and it will interrupt your sleep. I will say this: when you're in your early 20s, Jan and I could get away with that. I mean, our kids do that. They go to the gym late at night. They can get away with that. But when you're older, the older you get, I like to be done with all of our exercise before 7:00 at night, because then it won't disrupt our sleep. So it's very important to do it based on timing too. And if it gets too late at night, you're better off just not exercising.
Yeah, and I think this is an interesting point that you make, that in our 20s we can get away with these things. Can we?
Yeah, I get it.
Or should we?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, we can.
Yeah, but at what cost, right? Like, it's
Right.
still costing money, but we have copious savings in our vital reserve bank accounts at that time. But the problem is that in our 20s, we don't see that. And so we're just blowing through our retirement savings by not sleeping and eating crap and, drinking and, whatever the heck we do in our 20s and 30s. And then suddenly we wake up one day in our late 30s and 40s, we got aches and pains, we can't sleep because we spent all of our retirement savings. There's nothing left in the bank account.
Well, and that same conversation too, when it comes to shift workers,
yes,
it's easier to do that in your 20s.
Yeah.
But like you say, it's still killing you.
It's still, yeah.
I'm sure you see these people, and we see them, people that have worked nights for 20, 30 years in healthcare. It's very common.
Yeah.
And their bodies are destroyed.
Yeah.
I tell them they got to change jobs. I mean,
Yeah.
or change their shift. They're like, I like working nights. Well, it's killing you. I mean,
It is.
we're meant as humans to work during the day and sleep at night.
That's
Those are
true.
facts. I get it. There are people that have to do shift work, I guess. I would never, ever choose to do that because I care about my health too much.
And it's sort of a shame, I think, that modernity brings us to this point where some people do have to do shift work. This was never the case 200,000 years ago. This is one of the reasons that humans and dogs first got together, was so that the dogs could watch the camp while the humans slept at night.
Yeah, right.
Because that's what we're supposed to do. But of course, we've built a radical experiment called modern life that is living outside of our evolutionary parameters in many areas, and it's come with devastating consequences.
Oh, for sure. Right. So, Elizabeth, as we wrap this podcast up, we've had a lot of functional diagnostic nutrition people on our podcast. We've had Evan
Transdu, yep.
Yeah, Jennifer Woodward, Reed Davis. We've had
amazing.
Yeah, we love what you guys do. What's the best way to get a hold of you guys if we have any questions?
Yeah, please go to fdntraining.com. We really believe that the best way is to become a practitioner. If you're a health coach and you only have general health recommendations available to you, adding in actual lab data from this functional perspective is going to 10x your effectiveness with clients. And even if you're a person that's just working on your own health, you can spend a bunch of money piecemealing it, or you can go get trained. You can work on yourself and then others later. And so becoming an FDN practitioner has absolutely changed my life and my health. And I see that play out so many so many ways and so many days. Like it's really gratifying to be a part of a system which predictably gets results for people and predictably allows them to feel better and overcome their health challenges. So if you have any interest, please come on over to fdntraining.com.
We're gonna get that website up, and as we wrap this podcast up, Elizabeth, tell us what you have a passion for.
I have a passion for supporting the individual signature of healing that all of us are in this world, whether we're healers or not, whether we identify that way or not. We all have a unique way that we say things. We all have a unique way that we approach helping others. And I have a real passion for making sure that you have systems and processes that support that. And FDN doesn't come in and sort of change how you do everything, make you talk a certain way or make you do certain things. We have a real respect for who you are, for the uniqueness of your voice, because the world is not the same with you not in it. And the world is not the same without your voice. And the world is not the same without the way that you approach healing and that you approach others in your community, in your world, in your life. And we really want to be able to support that signature of healing and amplify it.
Well, you guys do a great job of that. I will say, when we had Jennifer on we've had her on a couple times, I think, but some of the ways she explained some things, like with the menstrual cycle, for instance, was just like mind-blowing to me, and this is what we do all day long. So
yeah
and just like what you just did, some of the explanations you gave, even though we've heard these things over and over again, your explanation was different and very well thought of. So thank you so much.
Oh, well, that's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on today.
Yeah, and thank you, listeners and viewers, for tuning into Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham. Our goal, as always, is to educate and empower individuals to take charge of their own health. So we hope that you've learned that today. Thank you.